Bang bang, bang bang, dead. Hello everyone, if you're here, I assume you're here for one thing, and that's to become the sweet inorganic general. So let's talk about how to become one. If you've made it to Protocol 6, I would assume you've made it that far, so you would know the basics. As such, I'll just go over strategy specific things and whatnot to beat the hardest difficulty. Firstly, I'll go over the strategy itself, which revolves around break. The reason why we'll be using break is because the traditional crit is pretty weak in this mode. As some people have mentioned, it's an RNG simulator, but thankfully some teams require less RNG than others. After that, I'll go over a run example and the mindset of said run. Depending on what you own, this may or may not be an option. Hopefully you have your break DPS of choice, Harmony MC, and either Ruan Mei or Fugue, and a sustain of your choice. Assuming you do, let's get on with the guide. Firstly, let's talk about the golden boons, which will giga impact how you play. For this, you're either going pure day or pure night, as there isn't really a reason to mix up the buffs right now. As of this video, there are only 6 characters because it's the first version of Protean hero, so we'll go off of that. Starting with day, this will be a pure damage build with little to no sustain. That'll mostly be up to your blessings and ability to break the enemies to minimize the damage. For this, we can either go Tribi, where we start with her tier 1 into a Fairy Tale About Dawn to increase the day ratio and final damage, and finally into a Prophecy Bringing Strife. With this, it will be permaday and you will get a 55% final damage increase. We don't need the energy refund in a break team and also don't want to switch to Knight from the tier 2 card on the right. The middle tier 3 also isn't that good as it doesn't increase our damage. The Prophecy Continuing Myths sounds good, but it's on an individual basis and it's really hard to stack up. The next option is Hysolence, which while focused on Dot, we can just take her and the exact same cards like Tribi to increase the final damage. As you may have noticed, the non-generalist cards not on the left pertains to their specific playstyle. Thankfully, Break doesn't need anything special to function. For Aglaia, she's currently the worst of the bunch and mainly increases speed, which we really don't care about. The only way to make her work is by going her tier 1 into Bloodstained Finery, and lastly Weave of Threads to finally get some of that bonus damage dealt. Moving on to Pure Knight, this currently mostly focuses on sustain with Mighty and Castris. This in theory, paired with Knight's inherent 15% final damage dealt, is the most damaging method, but it's a bit inconsistent as it requires you to take damage with Mighty and Castris. This is a really good option for the traditional crit DPSs because their teams are generally really squishy. Starting with what not to pick, don't use Cypher. Due to the wording, I don't believe her damage bonus even works on the bosses, so yeah. Moving on to Mighty, we'll go into his tier 1, which grants us sustain and damage bonus if a teammate loses 50% HP. With his tier 2s, it's really up to you, so just choose the one you want, either higher damage or more sustain. And tier 3, just go with the damage one. And lastly, for Castris, go her tier 1, Faded to Decay for that damage dealt, and finally, for her tier 3, it's up to your choice whether or not you want sustain or damage. For the run, it will depend on a few factors on what to choose. If the only options are Aglaia or Cypher, you gotta go Aglaia and lock yourself in a pure day. But assuming you have the options to choose between the other 4, I recommend trying to go Tribi and Hysolen's day route due to consistency, but if you still find yourself dying, then go Knight instead. I'll put a quick infographic on the screen to help you out. Next is explaining how the break or harmony path works. Harmony focuses on the new thing called Harmonize. TLDR, it's the break equivalent of Quantum Dot. You stack up Harmonize and at the end of the enemy's turn, depending on how many stacks you have, it deals damage. While it can deal a lot of damage when it does proc, this in itself kinda sucks. Just like Dot if you can't detonate the stacks with someone like Kafka. So let's fix this and move to the equations section. Starting with the 3-star options, we have Lazy Finger Joint, which applies 20 stacks of Harmonize when breaking an enemy. This is also what allows you to detonate the Harmonize stacks. This is basically the must-have of the run. If you cannot for the life of you reroll to get this, Flame Chase Alliance does exist and is okay as a substitute as long as you have the Break Blessing, second movement, which acts as a tiny Lazy Finger Joint. The last option and a great secondary 3-star for any run is Cocoon Dressmaker, which basically stuns the enemies when you enter Butterfly Soul state. This is a great equation for sustain. Some people have tried to go this route as their primary equation, but in my opinion, it's not the best as you lose a lot of damage. If the 3-star equations were what enabled you to deal more damage, or provide sustain, the 2-star equations are actually what gives you the damage. Harmony, in my opinion, has the best Q-star equations and is what makes you deal stupid damage. Firstly, Society of Charity is a must as it gives you another instance of super break damage. Assuming you only have Harmony Trailblazer, which means you only really get either 1 or 2 instances of super break damage, this is probably nearly doubling your damage output, not even including Butterfly Soul, which I'll dedicate a small section to, Propagation. Next is Orphan Care House, which increases toughness reduction to have a faster break and deal more super break damage, but this is also what allows you to consistently apply Harmonize. Wilting Patient is great after you can start detonating the Harmonize stacks, whether it's due to Lazy Finger Joint or the Blessing second movement. Sim Thanatos is the final useful one and increases your break effect by a decent amount. This one is pretty straightforward and also gives you a shield when you break an enemy, but this shield part is only for one character and there's a 1-star equation that just does it better. Moving on to the 1-star equations, we have the Flame Chase Envoy, which is the best 1-star break equation, which gives a lot of stuff. For Dawn Troop, we're just here for the Harmonized damage multiplier, and just like Wilting Patient, is great after you can start detonating the Harmonize. Skyblade's Legion is the sustained equation of choice, which will grant you a team-wide shield when an enemy gets broken. Priest of Time and Court of Echoes can grant nice buffs if you have obsession stacks from the Remembrance Path. Here's another infographic on screen to help you out. Of course, we can't have equations without blessings, so let's talk about them. Generally, we are trying to get as many Harmony blessings or whatever fills the equations, but after that, just go as many defensive blessings as you can. I won't list them all, but just know the defensive blessings are pretty important. I'll first talk about the non-Harmony blessings as there are just some must-haves from the other paths. From the Hunt path, we have our renamed Sovereign Skybreaker and Radiant Supreme to grant us that 100% action demands after we defeat or break an enemy. This is so strong, as you could assume, as it allows us to deal with AoE waves, which prevents so much damage as we can break or kill an enemy, refresh our turn, and just keep ourselves alive. Autumn Moon Sky is also a fantastic blessing which provides an AoE heal after we defeat an enemy, which will be pretty often seeing how this new Divergent universe is AoE centric. Besides those three, don't pay too much attention to Hunt, Nihility, or Elation. Moving to Destruction, Forced Jump is so strong and is similar to what Mighty used to have in his kit. Basically, if you get below 35% HP, you will heal off the damage. What's crazy is that when there is a move that will kill you, it can literally out-heal the killing damage and keep you alive. But of course, this has its limits. Destruction also has quite a few nice 1-star sustain options, such as Nova Burst or Bipolar Jets, so just keep an eye out for them. If you are using the Priest of Time or Court of Echoes equations, Cloudweave and Ridge Saw will be what helps you maintain your obsession stacks. I recommend you don't waste a 3-star blessing for Remembrance and try to reroll for one that's useful for your run. Your Edition has Optical Guiding Lens, which the heal can come in clutch. Sequentially written track can also prevent bad RNG just like Nova Burst from the Destruction path. I'll put a picture on the screen so you can remember the other blessings to pick up. Moving on to Propagation, I'll quickly explain how it works. You have Soul Chrysalis, which is your meter, which you start with either 30 or 60 charge depending if you have Chitin armor. You gain 8% every time a skill point is used, and once you get to 100, it will transform to Butterfly Soul and basically enhances your next 8 attacks and gives them true damage. And yes, this works a break. And to charge this, we are basically only looking for Sporocarp, Chitin armor, or Mullerian Mimicry. Budding Propagation also goes crazy as you can start healing on skill cast, which can be super useful as you could assume. Finally, the Harmony path. Starting with the 3 stars, the most important one will be the second movement, as again, we gotta detonate those Harmonized stacks. First movement can increase the stacks, but it isn't a must-have. Third movement also isn't a must, but when paired with Lazy Finger Joint, it can add a decent amount of damage, but again, not necessary. Of the 2 stars, Basso Continuo is a great starter blessing as the additional super break instance is a lot of damage in the early run and even late run. Righteous Nome is great for sustaining as it freezes the target. Next, we want Goblet of Dionysus to help us consistently increase the Harmonized stacks. Corona Pulse actually helps our damage even before we can detonate the stacks, which is really good. Iambic Pentameter and String Core Test is what we're looking for after we get Lazy Finger or second movement. They also have some of the best 1-star blessings as they just increase your damage by a good amount relative to the other paths. Freeing Tonality and Drunk Omens are no joke. I'll quickly have another infographic on the screen to show what to ideally get. Next, I'll quickly go over the strategy in regards to how to pick your blessings. Basically, you will almost always go for the ones that fits your equation unless there are one of the OP ones that I mentioned. If there's nothing that matches, then just go with the highest rarity ones as you can just reroll it later on. If it's all dookie, it's fine as you can just reroll it later. Moving to the weighted curios, sustained curios such as Silent Song, Excess Nutrition, and Dignity and Passion are the first picks when it comes to weighted curios, especially a Silent Song. After that, we have Cumulus Stake for the Lazy Finger equation and funny picks with Revitalization 310 and the Marmio Candy. Besides the sustained weighted curios, they aren't really that important for break anymore. So let's move on to the curios, which actually are a big part of the run. Because there are so many curios, I'll just be going over the best ones which can make your life so much easier. The God curios would be the Metallic Motor Ring, which while it does reduce the amount of fragments you get, you instead get 7 free refreshes for equations and blessings alike at the cat station, which easily can add up to a few thousand of comic fragments per station. Spinning Overlord Top is amazing for reducing toughness for bosses in the start, but also making common enemies to be able to be broken by either a basic or skill. Laurel Crown is of course the go and the get out jail free card, which can save your runs when you get stuck on the first or second bosses due to bad RNG. Unknown Lost Property and Kill That Butterfly are really cool curios which allow you access to the escapade domains, which can either A, give you cool stuff and let you create 3-star curios and also rewrite weighted ones, B, have this cool slot machine which gives you really good curios, or C, put you in a room with a lot of chests. If you get this event, False Future, it will provide you with talent cards which allows you to choose the final boss which you'll face. So let's quickly run over the final bosses. Sadly, the wiki doesn't have the boss list, but I do believe there's only 4 at this moment. Firstly, never choose Cirrus or the Banacademic boss unless you are super confident in your team and run. This is because when you finish a phase of theirs, or when they get a team-wide action advance, they likely will outright one-shot you. The easiest by far in my opinion would be Nikator or Hule. If you break the boss in time, they literally can't deal damage. Of course, just watch out for the one-shot combos, but it's pretty easy to avoid unlike the other 2 bosses mentioned. I want to quickly finish up this section, so I'll just say Ashes to Ashes, Faith Bond, Vile Mechanic, and the Spacetime for maybe E1 Firefly are all really good. By Any Means Necessary and Reunion with Death are some of the best 3-star curios if you're able to manage to snag one. High Calorie Diet, if you can save it for the final boss, is also broken as hell. Because you can restart the boss fight, you can actually reroll the boundary equation if you want. I know the Hunt one gives a team-wide 100% action advance, and the Elation one easily does around like 30 million damage a pop. But yeah, it's super strong. I'll put on the screen a tier list of what I think you should be looking for in your runs. There are some bad standard curios which I won't go over as you can probably tell by reading their descriptions, but just know, never get Moment of Tranquility for your rank up matches. It will outright replace your good equations with dookie ones, and that damage bonus you get is not making up for it. Now some notes to go over before I talk about the run. The first boss is by far the hardest in my opinion, as you likely don't have too many blessings and any equations activated. This is in my opinion where most runs die. But because we all break, we have such great sustain due to us being able to break the enemy quickly. Next, I want to go over the pace of the run. Ideally, by the first boss domain, you can activate one of your 2-star equations. By the second boss, you ideally have your 3-star equation of choice expanded. But thankfully, it's not too important compared to the other archetypes like Crit, simply due to the scaling that Break has. While I have been showcasing a sustainless comp, which does giga damage, I have done sustained runs with Gallagher, which I also found to be pretty easy in my opinion. For the domain conversions, I recommend you try to finish the first 2 waves to get the 2 chests. But if you have a giga stacked run, just go for as many cosmic fragments as you get. If you don't have a good run, you can actually just leave mid-fight. The cosmic fragment section I found is just not worth it sometimes. Sure, you can get maybe 100 more cosmic fragments, but that's like 5 to 10 minutes of your life and it's just not really worth it in my opinion. Actually, change your plans. I originally was going to explain a run on the second half, but I don't think y'all need it, so instead I'll use this time to go over some other stuff instead. Firstly, a TLDR on the domains and what to go. Rewards are by far the best ones as they're just occurrences that typically grant high tier rewards as the wiki mentions. Adventure is always a safe bet, granting cosmic fragments, blessings, and curios. Sometimes they can also reward you with occurrences, which I have gotten raw May a few times before. Wealth of course gives you money and a chance to win curios or blessings. I understand occurrence is generally looked down upon in these runs due to them sometimes giving you nothing or even giga shafting your run, but I personally like the gamble and the chance of a high reward. And yeah, you don't need to go encounter or combat domains unless you really want to. Now, starting with the start of the run, as you know, we get to choose our starter equation and curio of choice. That's pretty self-explanatory. As such, I'll go over the negative curios and what not to choose as they can seriously break your run. I've made a quick tier list to explain what to choose. The harmless to your run tier would be Rainbow Maker, Vision Clock, Black Forest Clock, and Divination Clock, which you should always try to go for if possible. Next, I move to the harmless depending on the circumstance tier. Teledol generally is awful and can ruin runs, but since you pick it up at the start, it will count the 3 enemies as 3 separate battles, so you only need to fight 1 more enemy to destroy it. Code Builder can also ruin runs, but Tribute completely negates it. Moving on to the annoying tier, we have Wildminder and Old Skin, which doesn't really ruin runs, but makes them a bit worse. Next, we have the really bad tier, and this is where you begin drawing the line. Mechanical Clock, Broken Clock, Communal Nexus, and the Swarm Tape really suck. Finally, the don't pick up tier. Perpetual motion is like a constant tax, and the Joystream TV, when it comes down to it, can really shaft your runs if you're unlucky. And by far, the worst one will be the IPC clock, which makes rerolls more expensive, which is a big no-no for a run. Lastly, never pick up Absolute Failure Prescription. There are some fairly harmless ones like decreased damage dealt or weakness break efficiency at the start of the run, but then there are some run-ending ones like enemies get 100% action advance, you get frozen at the start of the battle, or you lose all your energy and skill points. And here's the tier list if y'all want to screenshot it. But yeah, that should be everything. Y'all now should in theory be able to clap this mode. I want to note that the gameplay in the background for a majority of the video was just a good run that was played pretty well. Now, the runs with boundary equations had disgusting RNG, with the one against Hule literally being a perfect run, which I forgot to save. But everything you saw in the video can be replicated, although to a lesser degree if you do rock a sustain, although it will be slightly easier most likely. Keep in mind I do have E2 Firefly and Fugue and E1 Raw May, but even if you don't have that, you should still be able to do crazy damage assuming you played it right, as the equations and blessings are doing most of the heavy work, not really the characters. But of course, I want to thank y'all for watching and I hope this video helps you out. If y'all did beat it with another strategy, I would love to hear about it though. Now, as for future plans, I'll try to upload my casters video next week and perhaps the power creep video in 2 or 3 weeks from now, and then finally a special project for Genshin. But yeah, peace.